Two of the games of the year coming up this weekend. You got Tennessee, Alabama. You got Georgia, Texas. Big boy football down south in the SEC. And Joe, right before we came on here, we were talking like it's starting to feel like that fall weather where the games are really mattering. We kind of talked about it at the beginning of the season. We're like, oh, it's starting to get that chill, that fall type of football weather, but now it's starting to get into the weather. It's like, all right, the games matter a little bit more. Just went on a walk before this. My ears still ringing a little bit. I'm sure it's not going to be as cold down south as it is here right now for this weekend, but we got a lot of good games across the entire country and a lot more football to discuss after a big week last week. Some teams got, more to prove this week and maybe even an elimination game in terms of the SEC title. But welcome back, Joseph. How are we? And ready to dive into, hard to believe, week 8.
Yeah, Coyle. I mean, I'm fantastic. Like you said, definitely getting colder out. Went outside with my mom and brother. There's some comet in the sky. We saw it. Cool. But yeah, I walked outside. I was like, oh, I had to throw on a hoodie, and I'm a big boy. I run hot, so that's how it is pretty cold out. But yeah, it's week 8. It's insane how we're already here. Like Coyle, you and I have always said, enjoy it because we're already at the halfway point. If you include the conference championship week and Army Navy, I believe there's 16 weeks in the season, so we are at the midway point already, which is insane in terms of the regular season. But Coyle, you and I have also talked about it a lot off camera, how college football, and I'm going to knock on wood, I hope this doesn't jinx it for this weekend, seems to always deliver in the big games. The NFL, we've talked about, we've complained, off air, a lot of these primetime games, a lot of these big games, a lot of times fail to deliver. This weekend in the NFL, there was a lot of scoring, but it felt like a lot of the games weren't like awesome to watch. Even like the high scoring games, like 51-27, in the Bucks Saints game, that was a blowout. But college football, 3 straight weeks in a row. Last weekend, the Holy Grail weekend, as you were calling it, Coyle, delivered. Week before that, you had Bama, Georgia, big game, delivered. Or that was, 2 weeks before that. And then the week before was the week everyone thought was going to be a dud, delivered with all the upsets. College football is continuing to deliver, and I think we're going to get that again. We have a bunch of great matchups this weekend. We got a bunch of teams going in potential upset spots as well, which we'll get into. And I'm really excited to dive into it.
Yeah, I think weeks like this to really kind of put to bed the people that were complaining about the playoff expanding. And I'm listening to part of my take. They were kind of talking about it earlier. Like, I know, like last week would kind of the loser of that Georgia, or excuse me, the Ohio State Oregon game. They would have, if it was a 14 playoff, had a real uphill climb to make it. Both those teams, regardless of the outcome last week, were still going to be alive. But it gives teams like it really just kind of expands the field from 6 to 7 to 8 teams that could potentially make it to. Now I think there you can look at the top 25 poll and make an argument for 16 to 20 teams to still make it. Like in a couple of weeks, LSU and Texas A&M play. Most seasons that game, it's just a good game. It's a good football game, but neither of those teams in their respective positions are going to be playoff teams. But now they have a chance, and now they'll meet up in a couple of weeks, and that's like an elimination game. So you're just getting like more and more meaningful games. And I think from the consumer perspective, it's worth it. Like you're going to watch the game regardless, if it's LSU 7-1 versus Texas A&M 7-1. But now there's like some real actual stakes behind it, real meaning. And I think we see that across the board this week. Like we have our 5 games of the week as always, but like Nebraska, Indiana, like that game is a legit game that has playoff implications because of what they still have ahead of them, potential 10-win, 11-win teams in their own right. In years before, we're kind of just like pushing that one to the side, like, oh, they're just going to lose in the Big Ten title game and not have a chance. Both of these teams have a chance at this stage of the season, week 8. We're not in week 3. We're not in week 4. You got a lot of ball to play still. So each week you have important games, you have elimination games, and it's just great for the entirety of the sport, I think. And like you're saying, it's been delivering. And as big of an Eagles fan I am, I spent half that game on my phone scrolling TikTok. Like, bored me to death. But some of these college games, you're just glued to the TV. So we'll dive into it. As always, recap the week before real quick. Not my strongest week. 9-14 overall, 4-3 straight up, 2-5 ATS. I lost 2 games by the hook with Penn State and Kansas State. 2-5 on the over/under. 1-0 on my dog of the week with Virginia. They lose by 4, cover the 7.5 though as an underdog against Louisville, and 0-1 on my lock of the week with Tennessee minus 7.5 first half. Some real question marks at Rocky Top right now. Joe, solid week for you. 12-11, 5-2 straight up, 4-3 ATS, 2-5 on the over unders. Still have not been able to find your stride there for what seems like 3-4 years now.
Never.
0-1 on your dog with West Virginia, losing and not covering the 3, I believe it was, against Iowa State, and then 1-0 on your lock with Iowa minus 2.5. That was a steamroll. Good thing you went with that because Pitt was your honorable mention, and I think they won by 2. And
It's brutal. I had that in real life as well. I lost that game by the hook. It was on bad beats on Monday night after the Monday Night Football game. I had Ball State minus 3.5. Genuinely, and people say this all the time, but I think if you watch and you saw what happened in that game, maybe one of the worst beats ever. Ball State was up big. Kent State made it, a 3-point game. Ball State scored with 2 minutes left. Kent State scored on a Hail Mary with 30 seconds left to lose by 3 and hit by the. Then I lost one other MAC game by the hook. Definitely need to make some changes, but a tough weekend for me in real life. But Coyle, I think even with basketball, I am terrible predicting totals. I had that 1 week where people were saying I should have made a prize picks, and ever since then, it has just been a nightmare with my totals. I cannot get a total to save my life, but I think everywhere else, and I'll take that. That's why I stay away from the totals in real life.
All right, we go into our Big 5 games of the week as well as our G5 game of the week. And our G5 game of the week is our last game that we're going to talk about before our lock of the week and dog of the day. But we just come on here and mush these G5 teams each week. I think it's 3 weeks in a row now. We had Toledo last week that we wanted to talk about. They lose to Buffalo as a 9.5-point favorite. Week before, JMU loses as a 17.5-point favorite against UL Monroe. And I forget who it was the week before, but I want to say it's been 3 weeks in a row now. I know Texas State was on here at one point, was a team we were talking about. It's basically if they come on here, they don't have a chance. And to spoil it, let's just go and hit that game first, and then we'll get into the big games of the week. We go to the American Conference for our G5 game of the week. Fast forward a little bit. North Texas, the Mean Green at 5-1, travel to 5-1 Memphis. Memphis is the G5 team that we're trying to highlight here. Coming into the year, they were looked at as one of the G5 potential playoff teams. They had the big game against Florida State. They win that game, but obviously not a big win anymore, and they get rolled by Navy. But that's kind of looking like not that bad of a loss. So Memphis maybe still has some life if they run the table and maybe get a few teams to trip up. But this is 7:30 kick on ESPNU. Memphis, a 10.5-point favorite, over under 66.5, Joe. You think Nardone's Mean Green have a shot in this one?
I do think they have a shot, Coyle. I am going to go with Memphis to win the game 37-31, but I will take the Mean Green plus 10.5. I feel like it's a lot of points. Their one loss looks worse than it is, I think, just because that Texas Tech game, they had 3 turnovers in a row that led to scores. That was the game, I think it was 66 to 10 at halftime, or 40. It was a blowout by the half, and it ended up, continuing to stay that way. But I don't think North Texas is that bad of a football team. I watched the one game they played, of course, against Tulsa. I was at a sports book, and it was on one of those screens there, along with the Bama, Georgia. It was Bama, Georgia, and then North Texas, Tulsa right next to it. It was funny, but I don't think North Texas is that bad. Memphis, obviously, Coyle, you said it. Their loss against Navy doesn't look that bad now. I haven't, watched these teams in depth to really kind of give you a good analysis on this. I'm just going to go with Memphis at home, take the over, and take the Mean Green to cover. Good start for me. I have both these teams over. I believe Memphis is 9.5, and North Texas, I want to say, is 6.5. So, we're getting there. So, knock on wood, let's go Mean Green. But I am taking Memphis to win this game.
Yeah, the Mean Green are built to play in shootouts. When you look at their scores and the way that they play, they've scored 41, 52, and 44 over their last 3, going 3-0 over that stretch. Memphis, I was expecting to be more of an offensive squad. That's why they were my team, my G5 representative. coming into the season. I thought it was going to be an offense that really lit it up with a bunch of guys, including Hennigan at quarterback returning from last year. But outside of the Navy game, it's really been the defense that has carried this team. They gave up 56 points in that Navy game. Obviously not good there. But in the rest of their games, in the games that they've won, they've held their opponents to 17 or below in each of those 5 games. So a legit defense. Let's see if they can slow down this North Texas team. But I do think Memphis still has the pieces on the offensive side to be a team that goes out there and wins a shootout if they need to. I think the way North Texas plays, this one is going to be going up and down. I think North Texas can maybe expose Memphis's defense like Navy did a little bit more than some of these other weaker opponents. But I think this is going to be sneaky, one of the funner games of the day. I think Memphis talent at the end of the day at home too is a little bit too much. So I'm going to go Memphis 45, North Texas 31. So I'll go Memphis to cover 10.5 and over 66.5 there. All right, we rewind now. We go to our first game of our Big 5 games of the week, and it is the big noon kickoff game, 12 o'clock on Fox. The Nebraska Cornhuskers at 5-1 at the number 16 Indiana Hoosiers at 6-0. Indiana 6.5-point favorite, over under 50.5. Joe, big one here in the Big 10 for 2 of the upstart programs. I think we could say for sure. What are your thoughts on this matchup? And you think Coach Siggs and the boys continue to roll at home?
I think Coach Sig and the boys will continue to roll. I'm going to take Indiana 28-17. I'm going to take the Hoosiers to cover 6.5, and I'm going to take the under of 50.5. Big noon kickoff is going to be here, which kind of just tells you all the big noon kickoff is going to Indiana. I think that kind of is just like the point there. Like this Indiana team is probably off to their best start we've ever seen. I know the COVID year they had that awesome, with Penix diving against Penn State. That COVID year, they played like 5 games. They were like number 9 in the country. Those were weird times. Like the more you look back at that 2020 season, it was crazy. But Matt Rule cannot beat ranked teams, Coyle. I don't have the stat, but he's terrible against ranked teams. I remember against they played Illinois a couple weeks ago at home, lost to Illinois, who they're a good team. They're in the top 25, but I think that was a very winnable game. They go to overtime, they kind of blow the lead there a little bit. I think Dylan Raiola here going on the road, never thought I'd say this, is going to be a tough environment at Indiana. But, you got big noon kickoff. You're the national game. I'm assuming this will be a sellout. And even though, Nebraska isn't what it used to be, it is still Nebraska. They still are a kind of a big-time program. I think it's going to be a real great crowd here. I think Coach Sig, the one thing – I remember there was an interview after this year. They're like – I forget what the question was. It was like, or it's like, why did you get this job or something? And he was like, because I win fucking football games. That's what he does. He wins games. I think Indiana's going to be 7-0. I think Indiana's going to be undefeated when they host Michigan in a couple of weeks. I think they're going to be 9-0. And I think Indiana is a legit playoff contender, which is – I can't believe we're saying that, but I really love Indiana in the spot.
Yeah, I saw a video today. He was on McAfee, and he said, I think it was Big Ten Media Day, but he's like, yeah, it was the end of the day. I was tired. Basically been asked the same questions all day, and he said, just Google me, I win. Bold prediction, or not really bold prediction, but I'm going to go out on a limb. He's a little older than I thought. Like when you look at him, you think maybe he's in like his mid-50s. He's actually 63. But I say he is the head coach at the University of Florida next year. That's my prediction for Signet. I think he gets that job. I think they just need a guy, not like a young upstart, flashy hire. Get like a guy that's just going to stabilize the program and just has a track record of winning. And if you can win at Indiana, I think you could certainly win at Florida. But here's that stat you were looking for, Joe. Matt Rule, 2-20 straight up against ranked opponents. I had to make sure, double check that, triple check that. Quadruple check it even and be like, is that real? And including 0-4 straight up against ranked teams at Nebraska. So for as good of a coach he is, he struggled in these kind of big games. But we were talking about it that nobody would circle this as a Big Ten must-watch game. But here we are, Nebraska, Indiana, major playoff implications on the line. Nebraska wins this, they're right back there in the playoff mix. I think if they lose this, their playoff chances are done for sure. But they win this, they still have Ohio State up ahead as well. And if Indiana wins this game, they're going to be favored in every game heading into that Ohio State matchup, including most likely favored against Michigan. If you said that this time last year, people will be looking at you like you were insane. But there's a good chance that Indiana is 10-0 heading into that Ohio State matchup. Um, let's give Curtis Rourke, the quarterback at Indiana, some Heisman love, though. I think 1,752 passing yards, 14 passing touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He's got 3 games with over 300 passing yards and 3 games with at least 3 touchdowns. He's been awesome, and he's now up to 50-1. I know you gave out the Ashton Jonty at a little over 100-1, or was 100-1. But I think Rourke, if you want to throw a sprinkle in for maybe a long shot guy, 50-1. If he's an undefeated quarterback in the Big Ten, and just say that they win this game, they win the Ohio State game, and they go to the Big Ten title game, damn right he's going to be in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy. So look at him with these numbers and the way that Indiana continues to score and move the ball. Indiana has not trailed at any point in this season, which is pretty insane. But with all that being said, I think this is a really close game. I like Nebraska to cover, but I'm going to go with Indiana to get the outright win. Rule has struggled, as we talked about, winning against ranked opponents, and he struggled in close games. But what does Nebraska and Matt Rule play? Close games. So I think this one comes down to like a field goal or something towards the end, and Indiana finds a way to pull it out at home. But Nebraska gives Indiana their most trouble of the season so far. I really like the under too. I'll go Indiana 24, Nebraska 21. So Nebraska plus 6.5 and under a 50.5. All right, Joe, we go down to the South now. Number 7, Alabama, 5-1. At number 11, Tennessee, 5-1. 3:30 on ABC. Alabama, 3-point favorite, over under 56.5. First time back in Knoxville since maybe my favorite college football game I've ever watched back in 2022 between those two teams. 52-49, Tennessee wins for the first time, I think, in 17 meetings, and the first time that Alabama gave up 50 or more since 1907. A lot of historics in that game. I don't know if we're going to quite get the fireworks show that was in the Jalen Hyatt performance that we had from him in that game, but do you think this is any chance of being another all-time classic?
I don't know if we'll be able to get to the level that 2022 was, Coyle, because I do agree that was one of the best regular season games I definitely have ever watched. It's sad that that's already been 2 years since that game happened, because I feel like it was a lot more recent than that. But I'm going to go with Tennessee here, 31-21. I think they're going to do it again. I'm going to take the Vols plus the 3 points. I'm going to go under in this game, 56.5. These are two teams lately I can't figure it out. You know, Tennessee, it's like, oh, it's a tough spot, you know, on the road against Arkansas. Is what it is. You're coming home against Florida. You're expecting a bounce back spot. They survive against the Gators, who have been terrible this year. Same with Bama. You know, you expect Bama. Okay, you just got probably one of the most embarrassing losses in program history. You're going to come back and bounce back against South Carolina. And if it wasn't for South Carolina making maybe the worst game-winning drive decisions I've ever seen after that onside kick and just completely shitting the game away, I think Bama is pretty lucky to kind of be where they're at right now and still be number 7 in the country. I think Tennessee's the better football team. I think these past couple weeks have been more so kind of showing you who Bama is more than who Tennessee is. Bama really just doesn't look comfortable. DeBoer kind of seems, ever since that second half against Georgia, shell-shocked almost. Like, there's a lot of times it'll show him on the sideline, and you can kind of just, like, he kind of seems lost.
Robert Saleh look?
Not as bad. No one can look as lost as Saleh, but thank God he's gone. Shout out to Jets. We still stink. But I think DeBoer just like, or maybe lost is a bad word, but like he doesn't look as confident as he did earlier in the year or when he was at Washington. And that's another guy that just wins football games. But I think this is going to be a impossible spot. You know, we saw 2 years ago how crazy that environment was. You're giving Tennessee another shot against their biggest rival, or if not biggest, definitely second biggest rival, third Saturday in October. It's going to be crazy there. So I'm going with Tennessee at home. I think Nico's going to have an all-time performance that, you know, you're going to look back on his college career and be like, this was the game that really started him like taking off. I think this is going to be one of his signature moments.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of throw all the cliches and shit like out the window, like this is a game that college football is really about. You're midway through the season. I think the loser of Alabama, Tennessee, no doubt about it, will not be going to the SEC title game. I think they also have a very uphill climb to make the playoff with both having tough games left on the schedule. So Alabama, Tennessee on Saturday, I think should be an all-out fucking war. I try not to curse that much on the show, but that game should be a war. Two hated rivals. Alabama has dominated this rivalry, winning 17 of the last 18 games. Everyone was kind of beefing up Tennessee, hyping them up that they're here, they're the next thing. They've kind of fallen flat on their face the past few weeks. Alabama, it's a different beast now with Saban out the door. This should be everything that you work your entire life for, your entire offseason for games like this, for moments like this, for chances to win this game. I heard AJ McCarron talking about the other day, like watching some of the players these days makes him sick because of the business decisions they make and the lack of hustle and effort. Like this is one of those games where you put all the money, the NIL stuff to the side, and you go out there and just play for the guy next to you. And I think if we get that type of mentality from everyone in this game, it could be another all-timer. I'm really looking forward to this. I think I'm looking forward to this even more than the Georgia-Texas game. But to get back to the game itself, last week I bet against LSU and Oregon as home dogs. I'm not going to do it this week and live with my results. I'm going to take the dog at home between two closely ranked teams. Very worried about Tennessee's offense, though. Since that Kent State game, they've failed to score more than 25 points over their last three. Nico looks like he has been regressing a little bit, and something just seems off for the Vols offense. And it feels weird to say this, but they get to play an Alabama team now that has struggled on the defensive side of the ball. They allowed 25 to South Carolina, 40 to Vanderbilt, 34 to Georgia. Not your Nick Saban Alabama defense. So what unit shows up out of the struggling two between the Bama defense and the Tennessee offense? I'm going to go with Tennessee at home. I think they're just too talented on that offensive side not to figure it out. But both of these squads have major issues in terms of what we're kind of saying after a few weeks, maybe, but especially throughout the offseason of what they could be. I think everyone expected Tennessee's offense to look like it looked like with Hendon Hooker a couple years ago, with Nico in there now, maybe even better. But loser of this game will not make the playoffs is my prediction. Tennessee still has to play Georgia. We'll see how good Georgia really is, but Alabama still has to go to LSU. The loser is going to be really win out no matter what to make it. But a 3-loss team between these two probably isn't getting in. So the winner of this game is definitely going to have a leg up. And I think the loser is going to probably be on the outside looking in come Selection Sunday. But I'm going to go with the shootout here. I think we get a nice back and forth. Tennessee win 38-35. So Tennessee +3 over 56.5. Tennessee rides off into the bye week, Joe, at 6-1 heading into the big Kentucky matchup. All right, we go to the Big Ten. This is like the most Big Ten game I feel like we can get. Number 24, Michigan at 4-2, at number 22, Illinois, 5-1. 3:30 kick on CBS. Michigan, 3-point favorite. Over/under is 43.5.
I'm going with Illinois here, Coyle, 17-14. I think it's going to be, you kind of said it, the most Big Ten game ever. I feel like this game is going to be ugly. It's going to be sloppy. It's going to be, the stereotypical 3 yards, cloud of dust type game. Punting from the 40-yard line to get better position. Like, this game just has all the making of a slugfest type of game. And I think Illinois, this is their biggest home game of the season. If you look, they have Purdue, they had Kansas earlier in the year, which at the time looked, like a big game, pretty good when they rushed the field for that. Now you get a ranked Michigan team. I don't care if it's a down year for Michigan, 24th in the country. Quote, we talk about this all the time during basketball season as well. There are some teams in their conference, no matter how good or bad they are, you are still hosting that team. Michigan is one of those teams. Ohio State, another one of those teams for Big Ten football. It's kind of like Kentucky basketball in the SEC. This is going to be the biggest game of the season for Illinois. They are the 3:30 CBS. They are the game going right up with Tennessee, Alabama, which, by the way, if you want a good palate cleanser, just put these two games side by side. If the game gets too boring, just look at the Alabama game, and it'll be like watching two different sports. But I am going to go with Illinois here, 17-14. I'm taking the cover, and I love the under in this game.
Yeah, run, and then run some more. I will give credit, though, to Altmaier at the quarterback spot for Illinois. Like, I think if you swapped Altmaier and put him at the quarterback spot for Michigan, I think that might be a playoff team. He's played really good football this year, only 1 interception, but still at heart, Illinois wants to win with the run game and defense, just like Michigan is built to, or at least has to. This will be the first game for Michigan's starting Tuttle, and it's coming off the bye too. So I think he's the quarterback. It sounds silly to say it, but simply it's just the best quarterback to complete the forward pass for them. Not saying he's going to be a dynamic passer, but give the offense some sort of balance. He might just be their best pure thrower of the football, be able to matriculate the ball down the field with 4 or 5 yard passing routes, and maybe give some playmakers the chance to run. How good is the Illinois defense, though? Gave up 49 to Purdue last week, who had going into last week, Joe, Purdue had scored 95 points all season, and that includes the season opener against Indiana State where they scored 49. So it wasn't actually exactly an electric offense that Purdue is bringing to the table, and Illinois kind of got exposed. So that gives me a little bit of reason to believe that Michigan might be able to move the ball a little bit better and come out of the bye week with a more balanced offense. So I feel like I flip back and forth on this Michigan team every week, and I kind of hope Illinois just wins this game and Michigan probably won't be back on the show the rest of the year until the last week of the season against Ohio State. I don't have to talk about them anymore, but I'm going to say Michigan goes out and gets the win on the road this week. I think the point spread kind of indicates that too, with them being a 3-point favorite at a number 22 Illinois team. But I'm going to go Michigan 24, Illinois 20. So Michigan -3, somehow the over a 43.5 hit in there. It's a game, if you're betting it, I would stay far away from actually betting the over. But I think that's just kind of the way it shakes out. All right. Number 8, LSU at 5-1, coming off a big win at home last week over Ole Miss. Do they fall flat as they travel to Arkansas, who's 4-2? And I think it's been the quietest, solid team this year. If something shake right, who knows? Arkansas is 9-3, 10-2, dare I say, and fighting for a potential playoff spot. But I think Arkansas deserves a little bit more love. Maybe they'll get some more love with a big-time win on Saturday night. 7 o'clock on ESPN, right before Georgia-Texas kicks off. LSU at 3-point favorite here on the road, over under 55.5, Joe. You think Arkansas makes some shockwaves and one of the big upsets of the season?
Yeah, Coyle, I'm right there with you. I'm going Arkansas 31, LSU 27. So I'm going to take the Hogs to cover. I'm going to take over 55.5. We just saw Arkansas do this a couple weeks ago to Tennessee. There's no reason why they can't do it again. This is a very clear letdown spot. LSU going on the road. I still don't really know how good LSU is because after they beat Ole Miss, I don't know how good Ole Miss really is. I've seen Arkansas do it. It's weird to say I'm going to take the more trustworthy commodity right now with the unranked Arkansas Razorbacks, but I've seen them do it at home against a top 10 team. LSU going in this environment, it's going to be crazy. I'm not saying they can't win the game, but it's definitely not going to be easy, especially coming around off of a crazy, emotional, big overtime win. I just don't know if they'll be able to get up for this game. You have a team that wants it so much more. And with Arkansas, a team and a fan base that is starving for big wins. They got one. They won another one. I am going to go with Arkansas here. I think Sam Pittman, shout out Sam Pittman. I mean, the guy who was on the hot seat at the beginning of the season, now sitting here at 4-2. And the last thing I'll say, Cole, before I kick it off to you, we're going to look back at the end of the season and look at that Arkansas-Oklahoma State game and be like, how the hell did Arkansas lose this football game? Because Oklahoma State just looks terrible. Arkansas was really, really good. Tough loss to A&M as well. That's more, that's a more excusable loss. That game's always crazy. But I'm going to go with Arkansas in this game. And Coyle, I do agree with you. This will set up a potential, dark horse playoff contender type run for the Hogs.
Yeah, we're both on the Hogs this week. I think they pull this upset off. They don't just cover the spread. They win this one outright. I'm going to go Arkansas 27, LSU 24. So Arkansas +3, under 55.5. Upset with the trap game of the week, I think we could say. I think Arkansas, as we talked about at the beginning, is a lot better than giving credit for. But I think everyone's just going to see, number 8 next to LSU's name, them being only a 3-point favorite at an unranked team, and everyone is going to hammer them. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU is one of the most bet teams of the week. And you said it yourself, Joe, with that Oklahoma State game. They shot themselves in the foot and lost that game, and the Texas A&M game was a really good one. Kind of came down to the wire. And A&M is a solid loss in its own right. But this is an Arkansas team that is 5 kind of self-inflicted shots to the foot away from sitting here at 5-1 and probably being in the top 15 to top 20. Um, Feels like everyone's going to be taking LSU in this game, like I said, though. I don't think enough people have talked about or have watched this Arkansas squad. I think LSU, big time potential fall flat spot coming off that big Ole Miss win in overtime. They had to come back, win it at the end. And then LSU goes to A&M next week in a clear kind of look ahead spot. So two tough back-to-back games here for LSU on the road. Are they looking ahead to next week potentially? I don't think that they should be for sure. And LSU, another team that has squeaked out some close wins. Close win over South Carolina that they were down early. Last week, they had to come back against Ole Miss. So it's not like they've been going out there and dominating and having some really impressive games. So I think Arkansas's got some momentum now. And as we said with Sam Pittman, coaching himself off the hot seat and giving himself some more time here at Arkansas. I think this is a spot where they have a good chance to pull out this outright win, and I'm going to pick them to do it. Sam Pittman, 28-1 against the spread as an underdog at Arkansas with 8 outright upsets, including, like we said, 2 weeks ago against number 4 Tennessee. 6-5 against the spread against top 10 opponents, and Arkansas on this one too, coming off a bye, and it's the homecoming game for the Hogs. A lot of things working in Arkansas's favor this weekend. So look for potential upset here. I like that we're both on that one. All right, and maybe the game of the year. We talked about several games of the year so far with Alabama, Georgia just a few weeks ago, Oregon, Ohio State last week. This is a game that was definitely on everyone's top 5, top 10 list of college football games of the year. And hell, Tennessee, Alabama was probably on those lists too. But you got number 5, Georgia, 5-1 at number 1, Texas, 6-0, 7:30 kick on ABC. Texas went up to, actually, I saw today as a 5-point favorite now, over under 56.5. We have it at 3.5 because when I make the document, I do the current point spread there. So we'll leave it at the 3.5, Joe. But curious, your thoughts on that number continuing to rise, and do you think Texas continues to look like the best team in the country?
Cool. I think the number, rising is just indicative that Texas is the better football team. I'm with, we were talking about this off air. I love Texas here. I'm going to go Texas for the point of this spread for the 3.5. I'm doing Texas 27, Georgia 23. If the spread was 5.5, I would have adjusted my score to make them just cover that spread. I think Texas is going to kind of control this game. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a blowout than the score is going to indicate. But Quinn Ewers is the better quarterback, which is kind of, the biggest, factor in a game. Texas is at home. You're going to see one of the biggest crowds there in years for this game. I think that at the end of the day, you have those two things on your side. I'm going with Texas here. I'm going to take the under 56.5 in this game. But we saw it last week when you had two really, really good teams and, Ohio State going on the road to Oregon. In these spots, I'm just going to kind of trust the home team here. And Carson Beck, he hasn't looked like himself. And I guess, that kind of has to do with his, safety valve Brock Bowers being gone. But I feel like I didn't think it would affect him this much because he looks like he's definitely taken a step back. So I am going to go with Texas here. And you're going to see Georgia in a spot where I didn't think we'd be here. But with 2 losses, they probably need to go perfect to make the playoff, and they still have a road game at Ole Miss, which I know Ole Miss, they said might not be great, but that's still not a place that they would want to go play with 2 losses. So I'm going to go with Texas here to cover, and I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing about that game. I don't know the rest of Ole Miss schedule off the top of my head, but I know obviously Georgia is their toughest game left. If Georgia loses this game, there's a good chance that Ole Miss and Georgia are both going into that game with 2 losses. Like, that's another game at the end of the season where last year, however many years in a row, that game would have been kind of irrelevant. It would have just been, oh, that's a good game, I'll tune in. But that's a game that the winner of that game, at sitting there at 2 losses, probably goes to the playoff, and the loser probably goes home with 3 losses. So just another good thing about the extended playoff there. But here I am, and I'm definitely with you, Joe, that Texas is just a better football team in my eyes, and I like them to win this game. If Georgia drops this game, though, Joe, it will be the first season with 2 or more losses since 2020, and the first loss to a school not named Alabama since Florida during that 2020 season on November 7th.
Wow.
It's between Saturday and November 7th, 2020. That is 1,442 days. Pretty insane
That's
kind of
crazy.
kind of run there. I remember being home from school because they sent us home like early for Thanksgiving or
Yeah.
something like that, and watching the game. But the the run that Georgia's going on, it can't be discounted. But I do think all good runs come to an end, and I think this could be one of those games where we look at maybe the turning of the tide and Texas kind of taking over as the new king of the sport. It's really hard to bet against that data with Georgia and all their success, but I think this Texas squad is just on a different level. All offseason, my stance on Georgia was they're going to be good, but I didn't think great or elite. I just didn't think they had the top upper echelon talent that we've seen out of them in years past. I highlighted this all season. Three toughest games of the season in my eyes being on the road at Alabama, on the road at Texas, and on the road at Ole Miss. I said I don't know what combination of those games that they would win or lose, but I did have them losing two of those three games. And I think looking at the teams now, obviously already having lost to Bama, I think Texas is a much tougher team than this Ole Miss squad. So I do think Georgia's in a position for sure to lose this game and drop their second game of the year already and probably have to win out to just make the playoff. The defense isn't up to par right now. They gave up 31 last week to a brutal Mississippi State squad that Toledo went into there and won 41-17. You know, the Georgia teams of the past just don't do that. And we've seen them kind of mess around and play with their food a little bit too much. I think you can't do that and hope to come out on top against this Texas squad at home, too. That's my biggest thing. Like, I don't know why I didn't take Oregon last week, or I don't know why I didn't take LSU last week. It was one of the biggest reasons why I took Alabama against Georgia. And you saw certainly that helped them out at the beginning there in the first half. But I think Sark and Ewers are going to work this Georgia defense like they haven't been used to in recent years under Kirby and show everyone who the best team in the nation is. I'm going to go Texas 31, Georgia 23, Texas minus 3.5, and the under a 56.5 in there. All right, that was our final game of the week. We get into our last two picks with our dog of the day and our lock of the week. I went 1-0 on the dog last week. Joe, you missed on yours. My dog this week, I'm going with Louisville plus 4.5 at home against Miami. Miami has been playing with their food the last couple weeks, needing last-second wins against Cal and Virginia Tech. I think this could be a spot for sure where they take their first L. So give me the Cardinals here at home plus 4.5, and I think that they're a live dog in this one as well.
Coyle, I'm going to go with the Purdue Boilermakers plus 27.5. They are hosting Oregon on Friday night on Fox, 8 o'clock Eastern time. This is just like the worst possible place you could be if you're Oregon right now. You're on top of the world. You just beat Ohio State. You have a chance to potentially be number one if Texas were to lose. But, I mean, you got to go to West Lafayette, Indiana on a Friday night, going the whole two time zones things we talked about. I'm not saying they're going to lose this game, but 27.5 is a ton of points. I will definitely take that for Purdue. We've seen Purdue do it to Ohio State when they were number 2 in the country and they were 3-3. Even though they're 1-5, I still think there will be a pretty big crowd because it's not often, you get the number 2 team in the country coming to your house. So I'm going to take Purdue to cover that number there. I think it'll be, they'll keep it somewhat competitive. I think they'll keep it within the number.
All right, I like it. I think maybe even look at them first half, just make kind of things interesting with a big-time fall flat spot for Oregon after that big-time last-second win against Ohio State last week. All right, we go to our lock of the week now. As we said last week, I was off on mine with Tennessee minus 7.5 in the first half. They do not cover that number. You hit yours with Iowa minus 2.5 in a rolling of Washington. My lock of the week, and I will partner it with a bold prediction, Texas Tech minus 6.5 over Baylor. Baylor sucks. Texas Tech, I think, wins here by double digits. And my bold prediction to partner it with the lock of the week, Dave Aranda joins his bald brother, Robert Saleh, on the unemployment line and gets fired on Sunday and is the first Power 4 coach fired this season. Don't look now, but Texas Tech, 6-1, undefeated in Big 12 play and in position to make a playoff run. They're a fun team to watch. They can put up some points, but I think they embarrass Baylor at home on Sunday, and Dave Aranda gets fired.
Yeah, Coy, I love you're going to the butt game there. That's fantastic. I'm going with Iowa State staying in the Big 12, -14 against UCF. Iowa State really impressed me last week. I obviously knew they were undefeated, so that wasn't a surprise. But I thought they were going to be in trouble going to West Virginia, and they handled themselves very well. They smoked Baylor the week prior, who I know Baylor isn't great. But I thought that was going to be a little bit of a closer game. They won against Iowa earlier in the year in a game that they always seem to give away, but it turned they ended up winning that game. So I'm going to take them -14 against UCF. Tough one for the Knights going all the way up to Ames, Iowa. Night game in Ames is a really tough place to play. We've seen it in years past when they have the big boys come in to town. UCF will have to do for now. You're not getting Texas and Oklahoma anymore, unfortunately. But they win this game. Iowa State will be 7-0 heading into the bye. They come out of the bye, Coyle, and they host your Red Raiders, who you just talked about. That could be a game that we are talking about on Beef Up Front the same week as the Tennessee-Kentucky game. That's going to be a really awesome game. I think Iowa State, looking at their schedule, really hard to find losses on there. They have out of their
K-State in the last week.
Yeah, they host K-State in the last week. They go to Utah, but now without Cam Rising, Utah. Why does it do that? I don't know why it does that. And I wasn't even doing a thumbs up. I was doing this. I was counting. Probably Coyle that Texas Tech game, though. I can't believe it did that again. But it's UCF, Texas Tech, at Kansas, home Cincinnati, at Utah, home against Kansas State and Farmageddon at the end of the season. But I am going to go with the Cyclones to cover here. I know I just did it again. I built a path to the playoff, but I love Iowa State here in this spot, and I think they're going to keep the momentum going.
Well, McClay will have to tune in to the end of this because that's his squad. And you also picked Nardone's Mean Green to cover all in one episode. All right, but that'll do it. Let's hope this week delivers just like last week. And haven't looked ahead to next week's slate yet, but I assume with conference play here, a bunch more good games, big games on tap. But as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk next week.